Captain Zefka's hands shook as he watched the scanner display. His ship, the Serenity's Edge, was surrounded by death. The peaceful Vellani had never seen anything like this before. Their home world had no predators, no wars, no violence. They were explorers and scientists, not fighters. "Captain, they're moving closer," said Science Officer Kefna, her voice barely a whisper. The fear in her large eyes was clear. Like all Vellani, she had pale blue skin and stood nearly 7 feet tall. Her people were gentle beings who had spent thousands of years studying the stars. Zefka looked at the creatures hunting them through the asteroid field. The Devourers were unlike anything in the galaxy's records. They looked like metal spiders the size of starships, with sharp legs that could cut through solid rock. Their bodies were covered in dark armor that seemed to absorb light. Worst of all, they were smart. They learned from every attack, getting better at killing with each passing hour. "How many are there now?" Zefka asked. 47 that we can see. "But there might be more hiding in the asteroids," Kefna replied, checking her instruments again. "Captain, our shields are down to 30%. The power cells won't last much longer. The Devourers had been sleeping in this dead system for who knows how long. The Vellani had only wanted to study the strange metal structures they found on a lifeless planet. But when they took samples, everything changed. The machines woke up, and they were hungry. Zefka had watched in horror as the Devourers consumed everything in their path. They ate metal, plastic, even the atmosphere itself. They turned matter into energy and used that energy to make more of themselves. In just 6 hours, their numbers had grown from a few dozen to hundreds. "Sir, incoming transmission from the surface," reported Communications Officer Vel Th. "The research team is trapped in the mining facility. The Devourers have surrounded them." Zefka closed his eyes. 23 of his crew were down there, including his own daughter. The Devourers had cut off all escape routes. His people were going to die, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Captain, we need to leave." "Now," said First Officer Nethza, "we can't fight these things. Our weapons barely scratched them." It was true. The Vellani had laser drills for mining and simple defense shields for protection against space debris. They had never needed real weapons. Their technology was advanced in many ways, but it was built for peace, not war. "No," Zefka said firmly, "we don't abandon our people. Send out a distress call to every ship in the sector." "Sir, the nearest Federation vessel is 6 days away." "We don't have 6 hours," Vel Th. said. "Then send it to everyone. Every species, every government, every ship that can receive it, include the humans." The bridge crew looked at each other with surprise. The humans were new to the galaxy, having made first contact only 3 years ago. Most Federation species considered them too primitive to be worth talking to. Earth was classified as a death world, a planet so dangerous that it was amazing anything could survive there. The Federation's first contact team had been shocked by what they found on Earth. The humans lived on a world where everything tried to kill them. Poisonous plants, deadly animals, violent weather, and worst of all, they fought wars against each other. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. "Captain, the humans are too far away, and their ships are slow," Nethza said. "Even if they wanted to help, they couldn't get here in time." "Send the message anyway," Zefka ordered. "Mark it as an emergency. Tell them we're facing an enemy that wants to destroy all life in the galaxy. If the Devourers escape this system, they'll spread to other worlds." Vel Th. worked at his station, sending the distress call across space. The message would travel at light speed to every world with a communications array. Most species would ignore it or send ships that would arrive too late. But maybe, just maybe, someone would come The Serenity's edge shook as a Devourer ship fired at them. The shields flickered but held. Zef-Ka watched as more of the metal creatures moved through. The asteroid field, hunting for his people like pack animals. "Captain, they're learning our evasion patterns," Kefna reported. "Each time we dodge, they get better at predicting where we'll go next." "How is that possible?" "They're sharing information. When one Devourer learns something, they all learn. They're becoming smarter as a group." The situation was hopeless. The Velani had no military training, no weapons designed for combat, and no experience with an enemy like this. They were scientists trying to fight a war they couldn't win. 3 hours passed. The shields were down to 15%. The Devourers had found the mining facility and were cutting through the walls. The research team was sending desperate messages, but there was no way to reach them. "Captain, we're receiving a response to our distress call," Vel Th announced suddenly. "Which species?" "The humans, sir." "They're sending a ship." Zef-Ka felt a small spark of hope. "How long until they arrive?" 12 hours, sir." "But, Captain, it's just one ship, the UDS Ranger. According to our records, it's a military vessel, but it's small compared to our ship." The hope faded. One human ship against hundreds of Devourers. It seemed impossible. "What's their message?" Zef-Ka asked. "V-Ult-A." Read from his display. "Hold your position. Help is coming. Do not engage the enemy directly. Repeat. Do not engage. We're coming." The bridge crew looked at each other in confusion. The humans were telling them not to fight, but they weren't fighting. They were running and hiding. What did the humans think they could do that the Velani couldn't? "Sir, the shields are down to 10%, Kefna warned. "The Devourers are closing in." Zef-Ka stared at the display, showing the approaching enemy. His people were about to die, and their only hope was a single ship crewed by aliens from a world so violent that most species were afraid to visit it. "All stations, prepare for emergency power," he ordered. "We hold out for 12 more hours, whatever it takes." The Serenity's edge drifted deeper into the asteroid field, hiding among the rocks as the Devourers hunted them. Far across space, the human ship Ranger raced toward them at maximum speed. Captain Jake Sullivan sat in his command chair, studying the reports of an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The galaxy was about to learn. What happened when you called Earth for help? The UDS Ranger cut through space at maximum speed, its fusion engines pushing the limits of safe operation. Captain Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge, watching the star charts update as they raced toward the distress call. His ship was built for war, not exploration. Every surface was covered in armor, every system had backups, and every crew member was trained for combat. "Captain, we'll reach the target system in 8 hours, reported Navigator Lieutenant Ben Clark. "The alien ship is still transmitting, but their signal is getting weaker." Sullivan nodded. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from the colony wars. He had spent 15 years fighting pirates and rebels in the outer systems. His crew had seen real combat, not the peaceful exploration that most alien species preferred. "Commander Hayes, what do we know about these Devourers?" Sullivan asked his tactical officer. Commander Ryan Hayes pulled up the data on his screen. He was younger than Sullivan, but had fought in the same wars. "Not much, sir. The aliens describe them as self-replicating machines that consume matter for energy. They adapt to tactics quickly and work as a hive mind." "Sounds like the mining bots that went wrong on Titan Station," said Chief Engineer Sam Parker from his station. "Remember that mess? The bots started eating the station itself." "How did we stop them?" Sullivan asked. "We didn't reprogram them or try to shut them down clean. We just blew up their central processor with a fusion bomb," Parker replied with a grin. "Sometimes the simple solution is the best solution." Dr. Elena Martinez, the ship's medical officer, looked up from her reports. Captain, I've been studying the Vellani biology data. These aliens have never evolved predators or competition. Their brain chemistry makes them incapable of violent thought. They literally cannot think like warriors. That explains why they're losing, said Marine Colonel Lisa Rodriguez as she entered the bridge. She was a small woman, but moved like a fighter. Her Marines were already preparing for combat. Sir, I've got 60 troops ready for boarding action. We've studied the alien ship designs. Their hulls are strong, but not designed for combat. Sullivan looked at his crew. They were all veterans who had survived fights that would have killed. Most aliens. Earth had made humans into something special, a species that could think creatively under pressure, adapt to impossible situations, and fight when fighting seemed hopeless. The Vellani think we're primitive, Sullivan said. They don't understand that being primitive sometimes means being practical. They see our violence as weakness. We see it as a tool. The Ranger's communications officer, Lieutenant Kate Morris, received an update. Captain, the alien ship reports they're down to 5% shields. They've lost contact with their ground team. The Devourers are closing in. Any word from Federation Command? Sullivan asked. They're sending a fleet, but it won't arrive for 4 days. They're asking us to wait for backup. Sullivan almost laughed. 4 days was forever in a combat situation. By then, the Devourers would have consumed everything in the system and moved on to the next target. The Federation thought like bureaucrats, not soldiers. Colonel Rodriguez, prepare your teams. We're going in alone, Sullivan ordered. Sir, shouldn't we wait for the fleet? Morris asked. Lieutenant, those aliens called for help. When someone calls Earth for help, we answer. That's what separates us from the rest of the galaxy. The bridge crew nodded. They understood the unspoken rule that had guided humanity since they first reached the stars. Earth had been abandoned by every other species as too dangerous to visit. Now those same species were learning that sometimes dangerous was exactly what you needed. As the Ranger approached the target system, the crew could see the battle on their sensors. The Vellani ship was hiding in an asteroid field, surrounded by dozens of metal creatures that moved like living things. The Devourers were taking their time, slowly cutting off every escape route. Jesus, whispered Hayes as he studied the enemy. Formation. They're not just hunting. They're playing with their food. Captain, incoming transmission from the alien ship, Morris reported. Put it through. The screen showed a tall, blue-skinned alien with large eyes filled with fear. Human ship, this is Captain Zefka of the Serenity's Edge. Please, you must leave immediately. These creatures are beyond anything we've seen. They learn from every attack. Our weapons are useless against them. Sullivan studied the alien captain. He could see the defeat in those large eyes. This was a being who had never faced a real enemy, never had to fight for survival. Captain Zefka, this is Jake Sullivan. We're here to help. Follow my instructions exactly. But you don't understand. They adapt to everything we do. They're too smart, too fast. Captain, have they ever fought humans before? No. But what difference does that make? Sullivan smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. All the difference in the world. Parker, prepare the special packages. Rodriguez, get your Marines ready. Hayes, plot an intercept course that makes no tactical sense. The crew moved to follow his orders. They had worked together for years and trusted their captain completely. If Sullivan said they could win, then they would win. Sir, the alien captain looks confused, Morris observed. He should be. He's about to see something his species has. Never imagined. The Ranger accelerated toward the asteroid field at full speed. Instead of trying to sneak around the Devourers or find a safe approach, Sullivan aimed his ship directly at the largest concentration of enemy units. "Captain, they're targeting us," Hayes reported. 12 Devourer ships moving to intercept." "Good. Let them come. How long until we reach the field?" 3 minutes, sir." Sullivan activated the ship's internal communications. "All hands, this is the captain. We're about to engage an enemy that thinks it's smarter than us. They've never fought humans before, so they don't know what we're capable of. Remember, we're not here to be clever. We're here to be human. Sullivan out." The Ranger entered the asteroid field like a missile, moving faster than any sane pilot would attempt. The Devourers tried to predict its path, but Sullivan kept changing course in ways that made no logical sense. He dove under asteroids, rolled between rocks, and accelerated when he should have slowed down. "Captain, they're having trouble tracking us," Hayes reported with excitement. "Their targeting systems keep resetting. They're trying to find the pattern in our movements," Sullivan explained. "But there is no pattern. We're flying by instinct, not logic." The first Devourer ship opened fire, and Sullivan yanked the Ranger into a spin that should have torn the ship apart. The enemy shots missed by meters. Instead of running from the next attacker, Sullivan accelerated directly at it. "Sir, collision course," Hayes shouted. "I know." Rodriguez launched the Marines. Colonel Rodriguez had positioned her troops in armored pods attached to the ship's hull. As the Ranger raced toward the Devourer ship, she launched her Marines like bullets from a gun. The enemy machine tried to target the small pods, but they were moving too fast and in too many directions. The Marines crashed into the Devourer's hull and began cutting their way inside with plasma torches. The machine intelligence had no protocols for dealing with boarders who didn't follow any known tactical doctrine. "Captain, the alien ship is hailing us," Morris reported. "Put him through." Captain Zefka's face appeared on screen, his eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing? This is suicide." "No, Captain," Sullivan replied as he spun the Ranger around another asteroid. "This is war, and war is what humans do best." The Ranger had entered the asteroid field like a force of nature, and the Devourers were learning that sometimes the most dangerous enemy was the one who fought without fear. The first Devourer ship exploded in a ball of fire and twisted metal. Colonel Rodriguez's Marines had found the machine's power core and overloaded it with their plasma charges. The explosion lit up the asteroid field like a second sun. "One down. 46 to go," Rodriguez reported over the radio. Her voice was calm, like she was discussing the weather instead of fighting alien machines. Captain. Sullivan watched the remaining Devourers react to the loss of their companion. The machines stopped their hunting pattern and began to group together, sharing information about this new threat. They were learning, just like the Vellani had warned. "Captain, they're adapting faster than expected," Commander Hayes reported. "The next group is spreading out to avoid boarding actions." "Good. That means they're thinking defensively instead of offensively," Sullivan replied. "Parker, are the special packages ready?" "Yes, sir. 20 fusion mines, each one set to detonate on remote command," Chief Engineer Parker confirmed. "But, sir, using them in an asteroid field is crazy. The chain reaction could destroy everything. That's the point. Hayes, plot a course that takes U.S. past the biggest asteroids. Make it look like we're running scared." The Ranger began to move erratically through the field, seemingly trying to escape the Devourers. To the alien machines, it looked like the humans had realized they were outmatched and were trying to flee. The Devourers followed, confident in their superior numbers. What they didn't know was that the Ranger was dropping fusion mines behind asteroids as it retreated. Each mine was powerful enough to crack a small moon, and Parker had programmed them to detonate in sequence. "Captain, transmission from the Vellani ship. Lieutenant Morris announced. Captain Zefka appeared on screen again, his blue face twisted with confusion. Human Captain, why are you running? You were winning. Sometimes the best attack is a retreat, Selena explained. Your people are good at science, Captain. What happens when you apply sudden pressure to a structural weak point? The structure fails catastrophically, Zefka replied automatically. Then his eyes widened. You're going to collapse the asteroid field, parts of it. The Devourers think they're chasing us, but we're leading them into a trap. When those mines detonate, the asteroids will become our weapons. Dr. Martinez had been monitoring the battle. From the medical bay, Captain, I've been studying the Devourer movement patterns. They're incredibly logical, too logical. They assume their enemies will act rationally. What do you mean, Doctor? They're machines, sir. They think like computers. They calculate the most efficient solution to every problem. But humans don't always choose the most efficient solution. Sometimes we choose the most unexpected one. Sullivan nodded. Human unpredictability was their greatest weapon. Earth had taught them to think creatively under pressure, to find solutions that made no sense to anyone else. All Marines, prepare for Phase 2. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. Her troops had spread throughout the asteroid field, using the rock formations as cover. They were about to do something that would have seemed impossible to any other species. The Devourers had learned to avoid human boarding parties, so Rodriguez was going to bring the fight to them in a different way. Her Marines began jumping between asteroids using their suit thrusters, turning the entire field into a three-dimensional battlefield. This is insane, whispered Science Officer Kethna aboard the Vellani ship. They're fighting in open space without any cover. They're using the asteroids as stepping stones, Captain Zefka realized. But why would they expose themselves like that? The answer came when the Marines began firing their weapons. Instead of aiming at the Devourers directly, they were shooting at the asteroids themselves. Their plasma rifles carved chunks of rock loose, sending them spinning toward the enemy ships. The Devourers tried to dodge the improvised projectiles, but the Marines weren't just shooting randomly. They were calculating angles and trajectories, using the asteroid's gravity and rotation to guide their shots. It was like playing billiards with space rocks. Impossible, Kethna breathed. They're doing physics calculations in their heads while fighting for their lives. No, Zefka said quietly. They're not calculating. They're feeling it. This is instinct, not mathematics. He was right. The human Marines had grown up on a world where they had to throw rocks at moving targets to survive. Earth had taught them to judge distance, speed, and trajectory without conscious thought. It was a skill that couldn't be programmed into a machine. The Devourers began to take damage from the improvised asteroid bombardment. Their adaptive programming couldn't compensate for attacks that made no logical sense. How do you defend against an enemy who turns the environment itself into a weapon? Captain, the Devourers are getting confused, Hayes reported with excitement. Their formation is breaking down. They're spending too much processing power trying to understand our tactics. Perfect. Parker, detonate the mines. All of them in sequence. The first explosion turned a car-sized asteroid into 1,000,000 fragments. The second explosion caught those fragments and sent them flying in all directions. The third explosion created a chain reaction that lit up the entire field. Devourers found themselves caught in a storm of superheated rock and metal. Their shields couldn't handle the multiple impacts, and their hulls began to crack under the pressure. What had been a coordinated hunting pack became a scattered group of damaged machines. Now, Rodriguez, hit them while they're confused. The Marines attacked with renewed fury, boarding the damaged Devourer ships and destroying them from within. The machines tried to adapt, but every time they learned to counter one human tactic, the humans switched to something completely different. This is Colonel Rodriguez to all units. came the voice over the radio. "Remember, we're not trying to outsmart these things. We're trying to outcrazy them. Use every dirty trick you know." The Marines began using tactics that would have horrified a Federation military observer. They used their own damaged equipment as weapons, threw improvised grenades made from ship components, and even resorted to hand-to-hand combat inside the enemy vessels. "They're fighting like barbarians," Kethna said, watching the battle unfold. "No," Dr. Martinez corrected over the radio link. "They're fighting like humans. This is what we do when everything else fails. We adapt, we improvise, and we never give up." The tide of battle began to turn. The Devourers, despite their superior numbers and technology, were losing ground to an enemy that refused to fight by any known rules. Every time they thought they understood human tactics, the humans changed their approach. "Captain, we're receiving a signal from the mining facility," Morris reported. "The research team is still alive, but they're trapped. The Devourers have them surrounded." Sullivan studied the tactical display. The mining facility was on the surface of a large asteroid, protected by heavy shields, but cut off from any escape route. The Devourers had positioned themselves around the facility, waiting for the shields to fail. "Rodriguez, can your people reach the facility?" "Not without going through about 20 Devourer ships, sir, and they'll be expecting a rescue attempt." "Then?" "We don't give them what they expect. Hayes, plot a collision course with that asteroid. Maximum speed." "Sir, that will destroy the ship." "No, it won't, because we're not going to hit it. We're going to use it as a slingshot." The Ranger accelerated toward the asteroid at suicidal speed, but instead of crashing into the surface, Sullivan used the rock's gravity to whip the ship around at impossible velocity. The maneuver put enormous stress on the ship's structure, but it worked. The Ranger came around the asteroid like a bullet, moving faster than the Devourers could track. Before they could react, Sullivan launched every remaining Marine pod directly. At the mining facility, "This is Rodriguez. All teams, emergency landing procedures. We're going in hot." The Marines crashed into the facility's landing bays at tremendous speed, but their armor absorbed the impact. They were inside the compound before the Devourers realized what had happened. "Facility secured," Rodriguez reported. 23 Velani researchers safe and accounted for. "We're ready for extraction," Sullivan smiled. The rescue had worked, but now they had to get everyone out alive. The Devourers were closing in, and the Ranger was running low on ammunition. "All units, prepare for final phase," Sullivan announced. "Time to show these machines what happens when you threaten Earth's friends." The real battle was just beginning. The Devourers had learned from their mistakes. As the Ranger prepared to extract the research team, the remaining machine ships began to move with new purpose. They stopped trying to predict human behavior and instead focused on overwhelming firepower. "Captain, they're not playing games anymore," Commander Hayes reported. "All 37 remaining ships are converging on our position. They're going to try to destroy us through sheer numbers." Captain Sullivan watched the enemy formation close in. The Devourers had given up on tactical sophistication and were now operating like a pack of hungry wolves. Sometimes the simplest strategy was the most effective. "Sir, the mining facility shields are failing," Lieutenant Morris announced. "The research team has maybe 10 minutes before those things break through." Colonel Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio from inside. "The facility. Captain, these Velani are in bad shape. Some of them are hurt, and they're all terrified. They've never seen violence like this before." Dr. Martinez had been monitoring the situation from the medical bay. "Captain, I need to get down there. The Velani have a completely different biology. If they go into shock, I might be the only one who can save them." "Absolutely not, Doctor. It's too dangerous." "Sir, with respect, these people called for help. We can't save their bodies and let their minds break." They need medical attention. Now, Sullivan looked at his crew. They were all volunteers who had chosen to risk their lives for aliens they had never met. It was the kind of decision that made him proud to be human. Hayes, can you get a transport pod to the facility? Not through that wall of enemy ships. Sir, we'd be shot down before we made it halfway. Then we make our own path. Parker, how much power do we have left? Chief Engineer Parker checked his displays. About 60%, sir. The fusion engines are running hot, but they'll hold. Good, because we're going to ram the biggest Devourer ship and drop the doctor off on the way. The bridge crew stared at their captain in shock. Even by human standards, this was insane. Sir, that's suicide. Hayes protested. No, Commander. Suicide is giving up. This is just dangerous. Sullivan turned to address the entire crew. People, we came here to save lives. Sometimes that means risking our own. The Vellani think we're crazy, and they're right. But being crazy is what makes us human. The Ranger accelerated toward the largest Devourer ship, a massive construct. That looked like a metal spider the size of a space station. Its hull was covered in weapon ports, and its legs could crush smaller ships like tin cans. Captain, they're targeting us, Hayes reported. All weapons trained on our position? Let them. Rodriguez, prepare for emergency extraction. We're going to pick up the research team and the doctor in one pass. Sir, how exactly are we going to do that? By doing something so stupid that even the Devourers won't see it coming. The Rangers' shields flared as enemy weapons opened fire. A ship shook under the impact, but Sullivan kept it on course. At the last possible moment, he activated the ship's emergency thrusters and spun the vessel around the Devourer's whole dot. The maneuver should have torn the ship apart, but human engineering was built to survive the impossible. The Ranger's hull groaned under the stress, but it held together as they whipped around the enemy vessel. Now, Doctor, go! Dr. Martinez launched herself from the Ranger in a single-person pod, using the ship's momentum to slingshot toward the mining facility. The Devourers tried to target her, but she was moving too fast and too unpredictably. I'm in, Martinez reported as she crash-landed in the facility's medical bay, beginning emergency treatment of the Vellani researchers. Meanwhile, the Ranger had completed its impossible maneuver and was now inside the formation of Devourer ships. The enemy vessels were so close together that they couldn't fire without hitting each other. All Marines, prepare for the biggest boarding party in human history, Sullivan announced. We're going to take these ships from the inside. Colonel Rodriguez launched every available Marine pod at the surrounding Devourer vessels. The machines had expected the humans to try to escape, not to attack when they were outnumbered 30-1. The fighting became brutal and personal. Inside the cramped corridors of the enemy ships, the Marines used every weapon they had. Plasma rifles, combat knives, improvised explosives, and even their bare hands when ammunition ran out. This is Sergeant Dan Murphy, came a voice over the radio. I'm inside Devourer ship number 4. These things don't know how to fight in close quarters. They're built for space combat, not hallway brawls. Confirmed, replied Corporal Amy Foster from another ship. They keep trying to use their big weapons in tight spaces. I just watched one of them destroy its own wall trying to shoot me. The Devourers were learning a hard lesson about human warfare. When cornered, humans became more dangerous, not less. The Marines fought with a ferocity that the machines couldn't understand or counter. Captain, we've got a problem, Chief Parker reported. The Devourers are starting to self-destruct rather than let us capture their ships. They're willing to destroy themselves to take us with them. Sullivan nodded grimly. The enemy was adapting again, but this time they were choosing mutual destruction over defeat. It was a logical response, but it was also what Sullivan had been hoping for. All Marines, plant your charges and get out. We're not trying to capture these ships. We're trying to turn them into weapons. The Marines began a fighting retreat, planting fusion charges as they went. Instead of trying to hold the enemy vessels, they were preparing to destroy them in a controlled sequence. Rodriguez, status report. All teams are mobile and planting charges. We'll be ready for extraction in 5 minutes. Doctor, how are our guests? Dr. Martinez's voice was strained but determined. 2 of the Vellani are in critical condition, but they'll live. Captain, these people have never experienced trauma like this. Their minds aren't equipped to handle violence. I'm having to sedate most of them just to keep them functional. Understood. We'll get them out of here. The Ranger began to move through the enemy formation, collecting Marines as they evacuated the Devourer ships. The enemy vessels were now floating bombs, ready to explode on Sullivan's command. Captain, the facility shields are down, Hayes reported. The Devourers are breaking through. Rodriguez, are you ready? Ready, sir. All personnel accounted for. Sullivan took a deep breath. What he was about to do would either save everyone or kill them all. There was no middle ground. Detonate all charges. Now. The asteroid field lit up like a star as 20 Devourer ships exploded simultaneously. The chain reaction was enormous, sending shockwaves through space that could be felt for millions of kilometers. The remaining Devourers found themselves caught in the blast, their hulls cracking under the pressure. But the explosion also created a window of opportunity. All units, emergency extraction. Move, move, move. The Ranger dove toward the mining facility as debris rained down around them. The ship's hull was scarred and blackened, but it held together as they swept up the research team and Dr. Martinez. Extraction complete, Rodriguez reported. All humans and Vellani accounted for, but they weren't safe yet. The surviving Devourers were regrouping, and they were angry. The machines had learned that humans were more dangerous than any enemy they had faced before. Captain, we've got 17 enemy ships still operational, Hayes reported. They're forming up for a final attack. Sullivan looked at his battered crew and their alien passengers. The Vellani researchers were huddled in the cargo bay, still in shock from witnessing human warfare. They had never imagined that any species could fight with such controlled violence. Sir, we're outnumbered and outgunned, Hayes said quietly. Our weapons are depleted, and the ship has taken heavy damage. Then we do what humans do best, Sullivan replied. We cheat. The final battle was about to begin, and the Ranger was running out of tricks. But Captain Sullivan had one last surprise for the Devourers, something so insane that even his own crew would think he had lost his mind. All hands, prepare for ramming speed, he announced. We're going to show these machines what happens when you corner a human. The Ranger's engines screamed as Captain Sullivan pushed them beyond their design limits. The ship raced directly at the largest remaining Devourer vessel, its hull glowing from the heat of atmospheric entry into the asteroid field's thin gas. Clouds. Captain, collision in 30 seconds, Commander Hayes reported, his voice tight with tension. All hands, brace for impact, Sullivan ordered. But at the last moment, he pulled the ship into a sharp turn that brought them alongside the enemy vessel instead of into it. Now, Parker. All remaining power to the shields. The Ranger's shields flared to maximum intensity as Chief Engineer Parker diverted every available watt of power from life support, weapons, and engines. The ship's hull scraped against the Devourer's surface, metal grinding against metal in a shower of sparks. What are you doing? Came Captain Zefka's voice over the radio. The Vellani captain was watching in horror as the human ship performed what looked like a suicide run. Something these machines won't expect, Sullivan replied through gritted teeth. Rodriguez, are your charges ready? Yes, sir. All fusion charges placed along the enemy hull. But, Captain, we're too close. The explosion will destroy us too, not if we time it right. Parker, on my mark, caught all power except emergency thrusters. The Ranger continued its grinding path along the Devourer's hull, leaving a trail of fusion charges behind like deadly breadcrumbs. The enemy ship tried to shake them off, but Sullivan matched every movement perfectly. Mark. All power died except for the small emergency thrusters. The Ranger went dark and silent, drifting away from the Devourer like a piece of space debris. To the machine intelligence, it looked like the human ship had suffered a catastrophic system failure. All charges, detonate in sequence, Rodriguez commanded. The fusion charges exploded one after another along the Devourer's hull, each blast weakening the structure for the next. The massive ship began to break apart from the inside, its hull splitting like a ripe fruit. The explosion was visible across the entire system. The largest Devourer ship, the one that had seemed invincible just minutes before, was reduced to scattered fragments and expanding gas clouds. Direct hit. The command ship is destroyed. Hayes shouted with excitement, but something strange happened. The remaining 16 Devourer ships suddenly stopped moving. They hung motionless in space, their weapons powered down, their engines silent. What's happening to them? Dr. Martinez asked from the medical bay, where she was still treating the Vellani researchers. Science Officer Kethnaw's voice came over the radio from the Serenity's edge. Captain Sullivan, the Devourers appear to have lost their central coordination. They're no longer acting as a group mind. Sullivan nodded. They were networked together. When we destroyed the command ship, we cut off their ability to share information. Now they're just individual machines, not a coordinated fleet. The remaining Devourers began to drift apart, their movements random and purposeless. Without their hive intelligence, they were just advanced but mindless automatons. All units, clean up operations, Sullivan ordered. Take out the remaining ships one by one. The battle that followed was nothing like the desperate fight that had come before. The individual Devourer ships fought with mechanical precision, but no creativity or adaptation. Colonel Rodriguez's Marines destroyed them methodically, using conventional tactics that would have failed against the coordinated enemy. Within 2 hours, the last Devourer ship was nothing but drifting wreckage. The threat that had seemed unstoppable was eliminated. All stations, damage report, Sullivan called out. Engineering reporting 60% hull damage, but all critical systems are functional, Parker replied. Medical bay reporting all Vellani. Patients stable. They're traumatized but alive, Dr. Martinez added. Weapons and tactical systems operational but depleted. Hayes confirmed. Captain Zefka's face appeared on the communication screen. His large eyes were filled with something the Vellani had never experienced before, awe mixed with terror. Captain Sullivan, what you did today was impossible. Our military experts said the Devourers could not be defeated. How did you win? Sullivan looked at his crew, all of them battered and exhausted but alive. Captain, your people fight with their minds. You calculate, analyze, and plan. The Devourers could match that kind of thinking and beat it. Then how did you succeed where we failed? We didn't just fight with our minds. We fought with our hearts, our instincts, and our willingness to risk everything for people we'd never met. The Devourers couldn't adapt to that because it doesn't make logical sense. Dr. Martinez joined the conversation from the medical bay. Captain Zefka, I've been studying your people's brain chemistry. You're incapable of the kind of chaotic thinking that humans use in combat. Your minds are too organized, too peaceful. Is that a weakness? No, Sullivan said firmly. It's a strength. Your people create beautiful art, make incredible scientific discoveries, and build peaceful civilizations. We humans are good at war because our world tried to kill us every day for millions of years. You're good at living because your world let you grow in peace. 3 days later, the Federation fleet arrived to find the crisis already resolved. Admiral Kate Morrison received a detailed report from Captain Sullivan, but she could see that the other Federation species were struggling to understand what had happened. The Villani Captain Zeph Ka requested a private meeting with Admiral Morrison. Aboard the Ranger, his daughter, one of the researchers rescued from the mining facility, stood beside him. "Admiral, I need to understand something," Zeph Ka said. "Why did your people come? Earth is far from here, and you barely know us. You risked everything for strangers." Morrison looked at the tall alien and his young daughter. "Captain, when someone calls for help, humans answer. It's what we do. Your distress signal said that these devourers would spread to other worlds. If they escaped, that made it our fight, too. But you could have waited for the Federation fleet. You could have let others take the risk. No, we couldn't. By the time the fleet arrived, you would have been dead. When people are dying, you don't wait for backup. You do what needs to be done." Zeph Ka's daughter, a young scientist named Leth Ka, spoke for the first time. "The humans who saved us fought like demons, but they treated our wounds with gentle hands. How can the same species be so violent and so caring?" Dr. Martinez smiled at the young Villani. "Because sometimes you need to fight monsters to protect the innocent. Humans learned long ago that peace is only possible when someone is willing to fight for it." The Federation Council reviewed the incident over the following weeks. The official report stated that humanity had successfully eliminated a Class 5 extinction threat using unconventional tactics. But the unofficial discussions were more interesting. "They're not like us," said the Centauri representative. "They think in ways we can't predict." "That's exactly why we need them," replied the Villani delegate. "When the impossible happens, we need people who can do the impossible." Captain Sullivan received the Federation's highest honor for courage in combat, but he was more proud of a personal message from Captain Zeph Ka. "Captain Sullivan, my people have decided to formally request human protection for all our exploration missions. We've learned that sometimes the galaxy's most dangerous problems require equally dangerous solutions. When we call for help, we want to know that Earth will answer." The message ended with a simple statement that would become famous throughout. "The Federation, thank you for reminding us that sometimes peace is only possible when someone is willing to fight for it." As the Ranger departed the system, bound for Earth, Captain Sullivan sat in his quarters, reading reports from across the galaxy. Other species were beginning to understand that humanity's reputation had changed. They were no longer seen as primitive newcomers, but as the people you called when everything else had failed. Lieutenant Morris brought him the latest communication from Earth Command. "Sir, we're receiving requests for assistance from 12 different species. Seems word has gotten out about what happened here." Sullivan smiled as he looked out at the stars. Earth had spent centuries being ignored by the galaxy because they were too dangerous to visit. Now those same species were learning that sometimes dangerous was exactly what you needed. "Set course for home, Lieutenant, but monitor all emergency frequencies. When someone calls for help, we answer." The Ranger disappeared into the vastness of space, ready to respond to the next impossible situation that would require a human solution.